Welcome to a solitaire board game review of a very interesting game called Endurance, a solitaire game of Antarctic survival from Hollandspiele, designed by Amabelles, Holland. Now, the first thing I want to point out to you is if you look at the box cover, this is in 1914, the Shackleton expedition went to the Antarctic, hoping to traverse the continent by land. And they wanted to be the first that had done that. So they set off with their supplies, their equipment, their dogs, and they set out to do the impossible. And if you know anything about the expedition, I'm not pretending that I'm an expert on this. I've learned from this game and Amabelle's fine research and designer notes. They succeeded. Now, they succeeded not necessarily in doing what they set out to do, but they succeeded because not a single man lost their lives. No one died of polar bear attack. I know there's no polar bears there, but no one died from exposure, cold, starvation, violence, getting lost in the snow and frozen to death, or dying of just boredom and low morale. Nobody died. They all made it out. And I think the title is completely appropriate for what this game's thesis is. The game's thesis is this is a journey of endurance. This is a journey somewhat in futility. This is a journey that really had almost no chance of succeeding. At the time, with the limited technology that they had, the difficulty of the task, and everything that went wrong. So I think the game is completely appropriately named. I think it's a fantastic project. I think it's a very interesting exploration into this expedition. And I think that Amabelle knocked it out of the park with this one. The next thing I wanted to talk about, and I wanted you to kind of look at all the contents of the game here, including I'll move the game box back over so you can see it. Now, you will notice the only colors used in the game are muted tones, with the exception of the red and the blue. The blue represents a fresh crew member, expedition member. The red represents them being exhausted, demoralized, and flipped over. If they are moved off the board, they are then in the infirmary, and they're sick, and they can die. But you will notice every other color is gray, light brown, white, black, dark gray, taupe. I think the lifeboat cards are taupe. There's not a lot of joy here, not a lot of happiness, not a lot of over-the-top garish colors that would make you excited about this or even believe that there's something here other than bleakness, death, suffering, and ultimately failure in the end. I do think it's an interesting choice with the colors of the crew members. Blue, I think of blue as calm, under control, in the zone. Red, I think of red, the color of passion. Maybe sometimes fear or anger or frustration. And I think those are completely appropriate choices for the color of those crew members. I wanted to focus on that part of the game first because I think it sets the tone for what the game is. And I think what Amabelle set out to do was make ultimately a game that is unwinnable, but is winnable in the experience that you're going to get from it. Feeling that frustration, that difficulty, that, those times where you fail an action and you have to exhaust people, or you're trying to cook meat and your blubber runs out so you can't cook meat anymore, or when your canned goods finally expire, or your pemmican, or you lose your gun, or you break your rifle. All of those things happen. And then on top of that, there are events that even worse things happen. Leopard seal attacks, worms for your dogs, people require surgery. It's a continual up at dawn assault on everything that you're doing as a human being here in the Antarctic trying to survive and get across the continent. So let me show you what Amabelle thinks of the game. Sorry, I should have found this. Here we go. I think this is the part, the afterword, the part that I wanted to read. Amabelle Holland, in December, the designer, in December of 2022 said, "I began working on this 6 years ago, and for some time I struggled with how to approach the improbability at its center and the immensity of the men's suffering. But then a cascade of accidents and coincidences led me to, well, me, a me that nearly wasn't. The me who made this game, awestruck at her own improbable miracle. This game is for her and for that miracle." Now, there's some double entendre there, using the words miracle and suffering and everything that the Shackleton expedition experienced, but also what she experienced in her own life that led her to design and put together this game. I think that's an interesting way to look at it. But there's another statement in the book, and give me a second because I will, here we go. This is the one that all right, so let me just read this part. "Once lost, it is impossible to gain more of a resource except through a hunt action." These are the resources, real quickly. On their full side, you can use those. You're going to roll a skill die, the 4, the white number, and then you're going to exhaust it, meaning you're checking to see if you ran out of ammo, it jammed, it broke. And then when you fail that exhaustion check, it's going to go over. It still has the 4 skill number, and it's a little bit easier to make it last. It's not going to break or jam as easy. But that's what they're talking about here. When you lose those resources, it's done. And it says here about the end of the game. The game will end in one of 4 ways. Mutiny. All men are demoralized. That means every single one of your crew members has to be over on their red side or dead off the board. So that's one way. All lifeboats are lost at sea. There is a lifeboat mat where the men try to get into boats and make it over to Elephant Island to kind of progress their journey and hopefully get rescued. You can die there. In fact, if you lose the James Caird, which I did in my playthrough, and if you haven't watched that, watch that 90-minute playthrough, the game will end there. And it says that the James Caird lifeboat was lost at sea. 4th is rescue. That ultimately is the only way that you're going to make it out of this game alive, is to be rescued. Make it to a certain point, pass the test, have not everybody demoralized. But I think it's very key to understand where the thesis of this game is centered. Amabelle already talked about that at the end. There is no victory or defeat, only survival. This game really is about surviving. It's about making it from one event to the next while surviving. Using resources, flipping over men to exhaust them, using your dogs and your other resources that are at your disposal to simply make it to one more day. And I think that's the whole key of this. And sometimes I think about life, and I think about this kind of a game, and life really is like that. Now, I've never had to go out and hunt penguins for my food or worry about my dogs dying from worms. I mean, that's not something that I deal with in my daily life. But in my own life, I have challenges, and I think this game really captures that human condition of challenge to challenge to challenge, making it through, doing what must be done to survive. And this expedition, that's what they did. So bravo, Amabelle. And if you don't understand where I'm going with this game, it is a triumph. It is so interesting, I can't even describe it to you. And yes, it boils down to a lot of dice rolling. You're going to roll anywhere from 4 to 8 dice, almost every action, and you're going to look for successes. Successes are the skill numbers on your guys, 4 to 6. You have to roll equal to or above that. And then any one that's rolled is a failure, which very interestingly subtracts from your successes. So, for instance, let's just roll 6 dice. Let's say my skill number, let's say I'm using Crean. Sorry, it's not focusing. Of course, this is my lot. Crean has a 4 skill number. He happens to be number 4 crew member as well. So I'm rolling 6 dice, and I need to get 4s or higher. This is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. So I only rolled one success, a 6. I rolled 3 that are nothings, but I rolled 2 that were failures. So I'm going to take that one success and it's going to be canceled out by a failure. I have one failure. I failed the test. Now, had I rolled more successes than failures and more than I needed on the hunt action or other things, I would have succeeded and either gained some kind of a reward or simply moved on to the next test. So you're going to roll a lot of dice. It's a lot of dice rolling. It's kind of a bucket of dice game. In fact, one of my favorite parts of the game is the lifeboats phase. You're going to draw 5 of these cards for each of the 3 lifeboats that you're using. And then the crew member are going to roll numbers of dice for those members in the boat that are fresh, that are blue. And these cards are going to say, okay, 4 dice in a numerically contiguous sequence. 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, straight 4. I may only be rolling 5 or 6 dice, so this is going to be very hard for me to accomplish, but there's a rule. When dice are rolled for one boat, the ones that aren't used to succeed at a test here get pushed over to the next boat and can be used by that boat to succeed. And they're going to roll their 5 or 6 dice and use your rolls that you had to succeed. This is a very cool part of the game. That's the lifeboat segment, comes in about the midway point of the game, and things start to get desperate. I'm getting ahead of myself. Real quick, let's look at a couple of these crew members. Just to describe, so you have all these crew members, and I can't remember the number, sorry. They are named, historically named, Hussey, Crean, Kerr. They have a number. You can see Crean is 4, Kerr is 8, and Hussey is 12. Then they have a dice symbol. That's their skill level. Kerr and Hussey both have a 5. That means when they roll for tests, if they are the highest number, everybody, the 4 or 5 dice you're rolling, you only get success on a 5 or a 6. That's why a guy like Crean is so important. He's a 4. That means you're going to have a 50-50 chance of generally succeeding. Now, this is their fresh side. So when you flip them over, notice Hussey retains his dice symbol, but it now is a 6. He's not as good as he was. Kerr also turns into a 6, whereas Crean turns into a 5. Now, there are some crew members, like Hurley here. He, on his fresh side, he has a 6. When he's exhausted, he's going to have no dice. So he will not roll a die for your actions during that group's turn. And basically a turn consists of going from group. You have 5 groups here in your camp, the ocean camp. You're going to pull 2 cards from this deck, which is face down. I just took them from the discard pile. And you've got a choice. These are actions, and these are tests. So you have to choose first of one of these 2 cards. I'm going to do this action. This is called the hunt action. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll 1 single 6-sider for each guy in that active group. Plus, if we have the rifle or the shotgun, I'm going to roll 1 or 2 additional dice. And I have to get at least 2 successes, and then I'm going to collect 2 meats and 1 blubber. I use meat to feed me and the dogs. I use blubber to cook the meat for human consumption, and the blubber to heat us and pass a heating test. This one, you'll notice, has a red symbol. That means you're going to demoralize a guy, flip him over from blue to red in the active group before you even start the hunt. These are a little further out. They're a little more difficult to find. The weather's bad, whatever. So if you don't succeed here, let's say I had to get 2 successes and I only got 1, I then have to exhaust. I have to incur the penalty. I have to flip number 17 and number 10. So I'm going to go down, find 17 and 10 in any 5 of my groups and flip them over to their red side. If they're already on their red side, they are going to be pushed to the infirmary. They're injured or sick. Then if they're chosen again because you failed one, for instance, this card says 17. If he's in the infirmary and you fail another one, he's then going to die. So you have to do an action, and then you have to do a test. A test is much simpler. You don't have to roll dice. You just have to match the icons with the different supplies that you have in your supply cache. So for instance, I have to have 2 meat. If you look in my supply right now, I have two tick meats. So these are really 4 meats that I have. If I use that meat, this is 2, it now goes to 1 and I flip it over. So I have enough to do that. So I pass this test. Then what happens? I have to roll equal to or less than that red number, or this meat gets exhausted. So I'm going to roll a 6-sider. I rolled a 2. That meat now, it stays fresh. We didn't use all the meat. I just ate a little bit of it. Now, had I rolled a 6, like I did there, boy, I can get that on call. I'm going to flip it over. This is now exhausted. If it exhausts one more time, I'm going to throw this away. Now, meat and blubber doesn't go away. It gets put out into the wild because you can hunt penguins and get more meat and blubber. But the key with these tests and with these actions and tests is you're going to exhaust these guys. And remember, you're going to lose the game if all of your guys are red and there's a mutiny. Now, I also talked about events. There are events that are seeded throughout this deck, and every time an event comes up, you draw a new event from the event deck and throw it into the discard, because that's going to come up. But some of these events are red. These are timer events that are causing the game to move forward. This one, Lifeboats, now tells you that, hey, the endurance has sunk. You've now lost everything. And the lifeboats are coming up. You guys are making a break for Elephant Island because you're dying. You're starving, you're dying, your men are getting grumpy, and you need to try to make it off. So you're going to go to this lifeboat phase. There are other parts, for instance, this is Patience Camp, that says you're going to keep 4 supplies. You might have 10. Move any others to the Ocean Camp, and you're going to remove Ocean Camp card and all its supplies, so you're going to lose that. So you got to then try to hurry to get out there and do the dog sled to pick those things up so you don't lose them. There's also other events that are just plain bad. Remove all dogs and Mrs. Chippy. Mrs. Chippy is your cat. My Mrs. Chippy died. She can be a food source, but she also can be a source for you to flip over a failure into a success. But you're going to lose those, and then you're going to gain a meat because you're eating those animals. You're going to then demoralize 2 men, and that's bad, right? That's a bad thing, demoralizing men. So it's a progressive game where you're working through these event cards, getting to certain points. You're going from your first camp, where the endurance and ocean camp is. Then you're moving to Patience Camp. Then you're going to try to go into the lifeboats to get to Elephant Island, and then Elephant Island to the end where you can get rescued. But all that while, you're trying to manage your supplies, manage your dog counters, manage the morale of your men, meet objectives to gain things, and all the different actions have different benefits. Now let me show you. The back of the book has the food, the test, and the actions laid out. There are 3 actions. Hunt to get food. Sled, you're going to take your dogs, you're going to go out to the endurance or ocean camp and bring supplies back. You're also, for successes, going to be able to flip 1 man from red to blue. So once supplies go away, you can do a dog action, a sled action to flip your men over. The other action is entertain. You have to have a phonograph, the book, or the playing cards. You're going to roll dice. For each success, flip 1 man from red to blue in the active group. Then, if you have any left over, you can flip other guys in your camp next to you. Those are the 3 actions. Then you have 4 different types of tests. Food test, you just have to match the icons that are on the card. Heat test, you have to have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 blubbers based on the heat value of the different camps. These represent the coldness and the ferocity of the weather at that point. So if you can match those, you'll pass. This is the medical test. You have to have the medical supply, which I didn't. That sunk in the ship. And then they can, you'll pass that. If not, you're going to get men injured. They're going to go to the infirmary. The morale test, you have to meet the threshold of morale that's listed here on the player aid. All of these things are going to, you have to roll an exhaustion die, a simple D6 roll, and you have to roll equal to or less than the red number at the bottom of that supply. Now, what are the different supplies you have? Let me just show you a smattering of them. I'm not going to go through every single one of them. I mentioned a book. That's for the entertain action. Pemmican can be used as a food. This is the rifle, can be used to hunt. It's your best weapon. The revolver can be used to hunt. It's not as good. Pemmican again, and then you have canned goods. So canned goods represent 2 canned goods or 1 canned good, and sometimes things will call for, you need 2 canned goods. So you're going to have 2 canned goods, or you're going to have another food to convert into a canned good to pass those tests. I really enjoy the test concept and the action concept of this game. The other thing you got to remember is these are random. There's a whole bunch of these test cards that you don't put in every game. So some are not going to come up. Some are going to come up more often. That even makes the game that much more challenging because you may not have a sled action, and I played a game where I didn't have many sled actions. And that's one of the most powerful to get supplies and freshen men up. So that's the mechanics of the game. If you want to learn more, watch my playthrough, although be aware that I made some mistakes. What I want to say about this game is I do enjoy the mechanics of playing it. Yes, it's bleak. Yes, it's desperate. Yes, it's impossible, and there's almost no way to win it, but it's a very interesting experience. And I think the endurance and the experience are what go together so well. You're trying to make it as far as you can, doing everything possible to get to the next step. Just survive day after day after day. And that is where the enjoyment is. But let's be honest. Sometimes you're going to have to lose your dogs. Sometimes you're going to have to eat your dogs. Sometimes you're going to be shooting at little penguins. Sometimes you're going to be losing friends. Some of my favorite cards are the ones that are surgeries. You're going to roll a die, and if you don't have a 6+, sometimes you roll 2 die, that guy's going to die. And I've had 2 guys die in my playthrough. So there's a lot to like here. A lot of dice rolling. You can mitigate those dice rolling by using your crew members. I enjoy that opportunity. I think it's a very interesting concept. Love the morale test. Love the different actions, the entertain, the hunt, the dog sled. Very interesting. And then the events make it even that much better. So there's a lot to like here. I really do enjoy the game. I enjoy the process of playing through it. And I think that most people will enjoy it, but some might be turned off by it, and that's okay. This may not be for everyone, but I do think everyone should at least try it once, is my opinion. You get to learn about some interesting history. You get to learn about the human condition. You get to learn about how to endure and make it through. And it's supremely interesting. All right, so what are a couple things that I've maybe struggled with? All right, the first is the rules. I think the rules are pretty good, but sometimes there's little bitty elements that I'm like, ugh. For instance, when this malnutrition card comes up, I'm not sure it really says throw it out of the game. So I keep throwing those back in the discard and they keep coming up time and time again. Maybe that's right. I just wish it said it. I felt like the lifeboat description could have been done a little bit better. I also feel like, if you'll notice, I had to make these little signs because in the setup, you're creating what's called a reserve deck, a discard deck, a player deck, and an event deck. Oh, and then you're separating out red colored events and number 20, the hard choice. Very challenging for me to remember what is what. So I've made these little signs, and I will put those by those elements because that helps me remember, and that's good. So those are 2 rules-related issues. I'm not sure they're huge deals, but be aware of that. And I'm sure they've been clarified on Board Game Geek. I just am too lazy to look at it. The only other thing that I think I don't like, and I don't like this about all games, when there are exceptions or there are little minor aspects like, oh, you can exhaust Ord Lees, this guy, he's one of your crew members. You can exhaust him to make a resource not get exhausted. Well, that's great, right? And it actually says that in the rule book a couple of times, but I felt like it wasn't. Here it is. Here it is right here. I'm glad that they wrote that there. I would have liked to have seen that in red. I would have liked to have seen these in red. These are the dog team guys, because you can exhaust them to turn failures into successes. These are guys that you can flip to help with the entertain action. I just wish those things were maybe in red, so it's much more clear. The other concept that I felt was a little bit unclear is this concept of an auto pass. If these guys are in the active group when you're doing this test, like the food test, and you have green in your active group, you don't have to worry about it. You automatically pass. It's like you have enough resources because he's amazing. He's the cook, and he can make anything out of anything. By the way, pemmican is like blubber, fat, sawdust, and anything that you can find mashed together with grease. So you got to eat that only when you're starving. The heat test, McNish, he's good at the heat test. Macklin and McElroy, the medical tests. The morale test is wild. I just wish those were a little clearer. I think red text, but remember, and here's some of the red text. These are very important, tied to those events. I just felt like that would be something that I would have liked to have seen. Production-wise, this is perfect. Love the color palette, love the choices, love the different mats. These are canvas mats, by the way. Very nice. I feel like Blue Panther does an excellent job of making these. They don't fold. You can roll them, but you can just lay them flat in your box. Very nice component. Really enjoy the cards. I think they're well done, laid out. There's a lot of historical text. Love that, right? Just a couple tweaks I think could make the game better, but I would never condone trying to make these mechanics simpler or easier or more clear. You know, it's a test. It's a challenge. You got to do it. I enjoy playing this game. I don't have fun playing the game, but I enjoy it. I enjoy the experience. I've said that a couple of times. I'm trying to convey that so that you understand that. So I'm running out of battery. I've said enough about this game. I've really enjoyed it. Please go ahead and watch my playthrough. Please watch my unboxing. And please, as I said, give this game a chance. Borrow a friend's. Do the print and play copy. It is worth your time. I hope that this game gets a bit more wider coverage. I feel like it's kind of been lost in the shuffle. But I do think it's an excellent game. Bleak, difficult, depressing, gut punch, kick to the face. But you know what? It's interesting. And that's all that I'm looking for. An interesting experience when I play a game like this. So thank you, Amabelle. Thank you, Hollandspiele. Thank you, Blue Panther, for printing such a great game. I hope you check it out. So thanks for watching. I've been Grant for the Player's Aid.